Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. What comes to mind when you hear the word intuition? Perhaps words like instinct, gut feel, unconventional, hunch, or something more spiritual or mystical. But as you'll soon learn from today's guest, we use our intuition to make decisions on a daily basis without realizing it. Using our intuition simply means having a knowing or understanding of a situation without using conscious reasoning and making a decision regardless of the related analysis or facts. It's when we override the data based on our inner knowing. I'm joined today by Laura Haehl, who helps her clients access and trust their intuition. Laura has studied and been certified in a number of spiritual disciplines, including yoga, breathwork, and meditation, to name a few. She's also leading a group in the fall of 2022 as they walk a portion of the Camino de Santiago in Spain. Here's what we cover: what intuition is and why it's important to develop it, a practical approach to learn how to make intuitive decisions, what the Camino de Santiago is, and how making a pilgrimage can enhance your intuition. We end this episode with our Dose of Inspiration segment, where Laura shares some of the things that are lighting her up these days. And as always, I'll put links to Laura's website, where you can access a free course and learn more about Laura and the details of her upcoming trip. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Laura, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. I'm excited to be here.
So please, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
I am an intuitive coach, and I train people on how to use their intuition, especially around decision making, because I think that we tend to make a lot of pro-con lists and think about all the possible scenarios that are out there and ask all of our friends for advice. Each of those things can be helpful. They can always give you more information, but we sort of have this internal compass that actually knows the answer deep down. Sometimes it's covered up, so we have to figure out how to work with it, how to access it, how to use it, how it works for us individually, and that's what I like to help people with the most.
That's not a typical career choice. So tell us how you came to do the work that you do today.
So back in 2009, I was a high school Spanish teacher, and that was actually my second career. My first career, for those of you that are old enough to remember, the Arthur Anderson Enron scandal with the shredding of the documents.
Sure.
Yeah, I was.
Which side were you on there?
Not in the accounting side. I was actually on the consultant side in healthcare consulting. And it was nuts. Just things were changing so fast that it showed me that a company that's been around for 90 years, that's one of the big 5 accounting firms, isn't safe. It's not a guaranteed job path, which is kind of why I went into it in the first place. And so I decided to go back to school to become a high school Spanish teacher because I thought there's some job security right there. And then I taught for about 8 years, and I was running these big events for the school. And then I added on teaching in the summers in Spain, an immersion program. So I had done that for a little while. And then I was burning myself out. And I got this weird food allergy thing that came up. And I felt like I had food poisoning off and on for days. And my intuition told me it's food allergies. Then I went to what I call the skin prick allergy doctor, where they test all of your allergies using that skin prick test. And he's bringing in his, medical intern, like, oh my gosh, look at this case. It's so crazy. And so he's listing off all of these things I'm not going to be able to eat, at least for a while. And he says to me, you'll never be able to eat eggs again. And I heard the loudest voice in my head. It said, no. the Laura me that was present in the moment was kind of paralyzed and frozen and couldn't really think or even move when he was saying all these things. I left that appointment thinking to myself, I refuse to live like this. I absolutely will not live like this. It came on suddenly. I'm going to get rid of it. I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it, but I'm not going down with this. So I started getting energy healing done. I did this amazing practice called NAET, and it's an allergy elimination technique using acupuncture needles. And basically you hold these little vials of the energetic essence of all of these things, and they put the needles in for 20 minutes, and then you clear that energy. And then you have it's like 25 hours. You can't be around the food or eat the food to help clear it out of your system. I did a few of those sessions, and eventually it all cleared up. And now I eat whatever I want. I don't have any of those issues anymore. And that just kind of set me down this path of reflecting on my life of, okay, what am I doing exactly? I'm exhausted. So I ended up quitting my job and starting to teach yoga. And that led me to doing Reiki training. And it just was one thing after another that was kind of hitting home this idea of getting quiet, feeling the sensations in your body, and using your own internal compass to guide you. And I think that we all have access to that inner knowing, and we can really use it to guide us in any situation. And then, of course, it's hard because sometimes that can be, what's true for one person isn't true for another. So when I mentioned, asking your friends for advice, you always have to remember they're filtering through their own experiences, their own perceptions, their own preferences. And it's not that they're not going to say something brilliant that helps you out, but you ultimately are, I call it being the decider in chief of your own life. Like, you are the one that has to make the decision. So that is how I ended up doing this work. It's just very near and dear to my heart to help people, empower people to be confident in making their own decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get a little bit more into why it's so important to access and trust your intuition. But you said something about a test. Can you talk a little bit about what that treatment was? You gave it a name.
Yeah, I would love to tell you the full name of it because it's named after the woman who invented it, Nambudrapad. It's her last name, Nambudrapad Allergy Elimination Technique. And you can Google this and find maybe a practitioner near you. My practitioner was kind of rogue. He was a retired anesthesiologist who, I'm not sure he was...
who had some needles?
Yeah. I'm not sure he was following the whole process exactly, because I've read before where it's like, you need 10 sessions. And he's like, you can cure yourself. When I went in there, he's like, you can heal yourself. You don't need me. He looked like Santa Claus too. So...
And so what you were holding in your hands were vials of this stuff?
Yeah, they take these little vials and there's water, but then they send the energetic essence of cat dander, pollen, different types of flowers. Mine was all food-based. So when I went to the allergy doctor, he said, you shouldn't eat chicken for a while. Well, what the NAET practitioner told me was, it's not the chicken, it's the hormones and antibiotics in the chicken. And he said, it's not all dairy. It has something to do with the level of casein versus whey. I was more allergic to casein than whey. So something that has more whey in it is okay. And things that are fermented, he's like, it's not all dairy. You can have goat cheese. He was breaking it down into more specific things. And so you just hold these vials and they put the needles in and they put them in whatever meridian lines or channels that help clear this, or tell the body to reset itself. It's like you're putting your body near the substance that it was having trouble with, and then telling it to reset itself, and then giving it, the chi clock is 24 or 25 hours. That means it's rotating through all of the meridian lines and organs according to Chinese medicine. So it's based on Chinese medicine also. And then don't eat it for 24 hours. Then of course it's up to you if you want to risk trying it again after that. I don't remember when I first was brave enough to try an egg. And then for a while it'd be I'd have them once a month. And I still don't eat them every day. It's just, I'm sure I'm fine now, but it's also it was so awful that I just don't want to go back there. It's not worth it. So it's, I don't know if you've ever read The Biology of Belief.
Mm-mm.
He's explaining how cells work and then how we are like cells. So, and then he talks a lot about epigenetics, which is stress and our external environment affecting our genes. I think there's a lot we don't know about how things work. And I mean, the placebo effect is one example.
I was just going to say that would explain the placebo effect.
Right. So I was willing to try anything because of how I was feeling. And I found something that worked for me. So,
Wow, that's wonderful. So I'm going to take a look, and I'll link all this stuff up in the show notes. But one other thing before we go on, you mentioned, that you were teaching for 8 years and then you decided that you were going to quit your job. That is not an easy thing to do, especially since you took that job for all of the security it was going to give you and the summers off, which never materialized for you. Or if they did, it was short-lived. So just unpack that a little bit. What was that decision like before? And then what did it feel like afterwards? I mean, it's not always a smooth transition. It doesn't always unfold the way you think it's going to unfold.
It's very true. Luckily, I was already teaching yoga part-time in the evenings and weekends and subbing for people. So I had a plan, but it was not, I feel like it was not a decision. It was like there was no way I was going to not do it. I did back then, I'm just actually realizing this right now. I did one of the practices that I work with people on, which is, okay, is it this school? Do I need to look for, I was in a really good school. So I imagined myself applying at other schools nearby and seeing if that would relieve the feeling that I had that I needed to leave. And it didn't. So I kind of just put myself in the scenario, like, okay, I'm going to apply for this job and imagine myself in that school and I'm there and I'm working and it's just not fixing the problem. So putting yourself in that future scenario like it's already happening to see how your body feels. So I didn't really have a plan. I knew jumping to another job wasn't quite right. And I was just going to attempt to kind of, work in the gig economy and start teaching yoga more full time. And I did my first round of my website back in that time period. And I was tutoring. I did all kinds of different jobs. It was like a soul calling almost. Like I just knew I had to get out of there. I knew it wasn't healthy for me. I knew it was like I was like dying a soul death slowly on the inside, and that I would figure things out as I went. So, and I just was responsible for myself. I didn't have kids or anything like that.
And so the day comes where you would have gone back to school and you're teaching yoga. What was that like? Was it like, yep, this is the right thing? Or was it like, what did I do?
No, I never looked back after I made the decision, but it was kind of weird to think everybody else was going back to school and I wasn't. It's kind of like those days when you take a day off work and everyone else is at work and you feel like you're playing hooky. It was a little bit like that for a little while, but it worked pretty well because since I wasn't leaving a regular job, I was leaving teaching, you're already completely off in the summer. So you're already completely off with everyone else and they're going back and you're not. So it's a little bit different. It was a little surreal, but for the most part, I felt like I had made the right decision.
Now, I was going to ask you about, the importance of accessing and trusting your intuition, but I'm going to frame it a different way because you gave me an interesting view. This idea of putting yourself in the future scenario. And the reason why it resonated so much for me is I can remember in my corporate days doing just that. I wouldn't have called it intuition. I was calling it like, if another job opportunity came my way, what would it feel like on that first day? The alarm goes off and I'm getting up and I'm getting dressed. How would I feel versus how I feel now, and kind of doing that comparison. So I may have in those days called it a comparison, but it is really using your intuition. So can you help us maybe using that kind of an example, why it's so important to access our intuition and how we might be able to use it in everyday life just like that?
Well, I think you nailed it on the head when you said the word feel. So there's an example of a woman that was a client. She was looking at 3 different jobs and I had her go into those scenarios of the future kind of projection, and she knew which job she wanted, but it was not the one that was paying the most. And she took the one that she really wanted because there was something in her body that just knew that that was the right alignment. So it's the feeling, not just the body sensations. You're actually using your body to tell you the answer. And then also the sensations that you get or even the feelings that you have. So I like to give people a really easy example, which is if you think about the worst restaurant in your town that you could eat at, and you imagine yourself walking in there to go to dinner, and you feel that in your body. And then you think about the same thing, but it's your favorite restaurant. So you go into your favorite restaurant, and how does that feel in your body? You will probably feel something along the lines of constriction, tightness, squeezing in when you go into the restaurant you don't like, and this lightness, openness, open-hearted expansiveness when you go into the restaurant you do like. So you're trying to get that baseline sensation. And to me, you're more in line with your heart, your feelings, your intuition when you're stepping into that expansiveness. And that expansive feeling is along that track of joy. The restriction and the tightness is along the opposite track.
I'm so glad you said that, because we do hear that a lot. And I know while I was at my busiest, when someone said, you know what, Kathy, you really need to experience joy more. You would, yeah, exactly. I don't even have to say what I would have said. Right. But I never made the connection until recently that the reason why that's so important is exactly the way you described it. When you get that sense of expansiveness, it means that you're in a place that you need to be. Like, it's telling you something. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just frivolous joy, although there's nothing wrong with that. And hey, the more the merrier, like, that's fine. But there's a real reason behind why it's so important to be able to recognize that feeling. And, as you were talking, I'm so glad that you mentioned that there's very practical applications when you can learn what it feels like to open and close like that. And I have seen this. I never had the words for it when I was in my corporate career, but I would see time and time again, board members, executive members who would override that more male logical sense when seeing data on, hey, this is the way we should go. There was that feeling, which I didn't realize was expansiveness, that was telling them otherwise. And, it never failed. They would go with, yeah, I understand, but I really feel we should go this way. Not in, oh, I have this feeling, but more of that, no, I understand that makes logical sense, but I think this is the way to go. And this is exactly what they were doing without knowing. We all were, mm-hmm. And so business is really run this way. Although, we don't have those words. And if those folks at Arthur Andersen would have just listened,
right,
your life may have been very different, quite frankly, right? If that was the case. But we know, mm-hmm. and being able to tap into that. And I think that's what you're getting at with the work that you do, which I think is fascinating. One thing I did want to ask you, we hear the word intuitive a lot, but we also hear the word empathic. What's mm-hmm. the difference between the two?
That's a really good question. Being empathic is being able to sense other people's feelings so that you can kind of navigate a situation. So I always think of empathic as being involving someone else. Intuitive is, I think, a lot more personal and kind of like we've been talking about, using it for your own purpose. Some people would say that they're one and the same, but I really don't think so. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if I understand, intuitive is more internal to me, where empathic is more, it's the external environment that's impacting me. Mm-hmm. And I can take that on in some way, whether it's just from an understanding standpoint, or I might be able to carry that. And I'm going to guess that it doesn't have to be a person. It could be the news or other things, right?
Right. You can be picking up, and your feelings can be affected by people that are around you, but also the news, like you said. And I would say that intuition would almost come in as, it's like you hear this story and then your intuition says, is there something I need to do about that? And you can intuitively feel like, no, I don't need to, or yes, I do. I would feel better if I did this. You could feel that expansion going on.
So you have an approach on how to help people discover and make better intuitive decisions. Can you talk us through that a bit?
Definitely. So I have a 3-element process, and the first process, I don't call them steps because they don't necessarily have to go in order, and you're kind of working on them all at the same time. So the first one is knowing yourself. And there are a million ways to do this. You could be, maybe you're going to therapy. Maybe you're journaling about what's going on in your life. Maybe you're just observing interactions that you have with people so you can learn how you're reacting. The Enneagram tests and like Myers-Briggs, that kind of stuff helps you to get to know yourself better. We want to do this because we want to understand our tendencies toward how we interact with other people. Some people will take on the excitement of someone else's vision and just kind of run with it. And then all of a sudden be like, wait a minute, I'm not actually excited about this. They're excited about this. So it's learning what's yours and what's someone else's. And then the second part of this is clearing your energy, working out, getting enough sleep, eating well, and even just doing deep breathing in the moment, taking that pause when you're trying to make the decision. Anything that's allowing you to get clearer, calming your energy down. If it's something that brings you peace, that's a way to clear your energy. You want to kind of start in that centered place. If you're frazzled or stressed, it's going to be harder to access your intuition. And then finally, it's maximizing your skills. So it's practicing with it. Just like if you're picking up any other skill, if you're going to learn how to play basketball, you have to work at it and practice. And then you start to feel more comfortable that you're getting the information that you want, and you start to get more confident with it.
So it's learning to trust it through doing it over and over for repetitiveness.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your belief in the power of pilgrimage. I know that you're heading on a big trip, and I've been really wanting to explore this a bit with you. So you're heading to walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain. Mm-hmm. Now I know why. You speak fluent Spanish, so yes. That's a big help. That's wonderful. But for those who aren't aware, before we dive into this trip, what is the Camino?
So the Camino is a walking pilgrimage, and there are pilgrimages all over the world, but this is the most famous and one of the oldest ones. It actually is over 1,000 years old. And there was a legend that these people found the remains of St. James in the middle of a field underneath a star, which is actually what Compostela means. Campo is field and Stella is star. And from there, I mean, there was nothing in this area. People started leaving out of their front door and walking to this area, and then they just stayed. So it became a mixture of a bunch of different cultures, and then the city was built up around it, and a church and an old hotel that used to be a hospital that King Ferdinand and Isabella that sent Christopher Columbus to the New World, they built that hotel and hospital. So there's a lot of history there. The town itself, I think, sells the most one-way flights out of its town more than anywhere else. So you can walk as long as you like for as many days as you like. The most traditional route goes from across the Pyrenees in southwestern France, across northern Spain. And if you've ever seen the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, you get an idea of what this is like. And you're just walking every day. And so the traditional way is to carry all of your stuff with you. So you carry as little as you can. You're washing your clothes every night, and you're trying to find a place to stay every night. And these giant, they're not hostels necessarily, but they're like bunk beds, like 40 or 50 bunk beds in these places. And so the routes, there are routes in southern Spain, there are routes up from Portugal. You can walk. I mean, I think I met somebody one time that was starting out in Russia and coming all the way across. I mean, you can go for as long as you want. I did this in 2018. I have a friend that runs a tour company in Andalusia, and I met him through when I took students abroad for like a 10-day trip when I was teaching high school. And he called me up and said, we have a couple of openings left for this Camino yoga pilgrimage. And when he said, we've got it all planned. You're just going to show up. You're going to carry a small day pack each day, and you're just going to walk. And what I realized after that trip was over, it was how few decisions I actually had to make all week. I basically decided what to eat for 3 meals a day, and that was it. No other decisions had to be made. So for me, taking away the stress, the physical stress, was really helpful. And I kind of like to think of it as like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're removing the on a guided tour like we're taking this fall, you're removing the physical difficulties. What we got to really focus on was just the walking and the quiet and the lack of technology and the lack of people and the space. And that was a really great place to be able to tune into your inner wisdom and your intuition, because you had nothing else to do but look at beautiful scenery and walk and talk to people if you wanted to. So we're taking a group this fall. We're going to walk the last 100 kilometers into Santiago from the south. And we're doing about 25 kilometers on some days, which is like 15.5 miles, and 20 on other days. And the benefit of walking the last 100 kilometers into Santiago is you get your little certificate to prove that you did the Camino. You have to walk the last 100 kilometers in to do that. Now you can walk anywhere else. When we went in 2018, I went from Malaga to Cordoba, which is down in Andalusia. So we didn't even get up to Santiago. But and when you get into the town of Santiago, it's just all these people that have just finished the pilgrimage. Sometimes there are like tents camped out in front of the church. There's special pilgrim masses, and it's just this magical city of all of these people that are basically transforming their lives. And but they always say the Camino calls to you. When it's your time to go, you're being called. And I'm just getting a lot of chills while I'm talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Camino is calling to you and you don't want to carry your clothes around or try to figure out where you want to sleep every night, you can find this on my website, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, at the end of the episode.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that idea. When you're thinking about walking the spiritual journey or an intuitive one or whatever word you want to give to it, this whole idea of walking the path and doing so in a pilgrim kind of way, because the word pilgrim means that you're dropping your identity, right? So you're agreeing that the person that you were when you started is not going to be who you are at the end, but you don't know who that's going to be until you take those steps.
Right.
So this is really deep work, and I applaud you for heeding the call. And I hope you'll come back and tell us not only how the pilgrimage went for you, but also with the folks that you're taking.
Yeah, great. I would love to.
Wonderful. So we end these episodes with something we call Dose of Inspiration, and just a couple of questions so the guests can get to know you a little bit more. And I'm curious on what you may have read or listened to lately that you've enjoyed that you think our listeners may enjoy.
I just read a book, and I feel like I'm kind of behind, but it's called Nonviolent Communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to take a course on it, because it's like I can't practice it now just because I read the book. But I think it's so important for all of us to be able to understand how to communicate in this way. And I highly recommend it for anyone, especially if you're having any relationship issues or you're in charge of people at work or you've got children. It just is such a beautiful methodology for being really clear and even, again, getting to know yourself better. Because I think a lot of times we just, spit out something that it's just that we think is what we're feeling. But if you listen to this book or read the book and you get to the formula of the way they kind of tell you to structure your sentences, it's like you are forced to say, no, what am I actually really feeling right now? And what really caused that? And it gets you really to the heart of the matter.
Intuitively.
Yeah.
Right. It gets you to connect.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the book. My best friend actually takes those practices into the prison systems out in Washington State, and it's incredibly effective. And the stories are just unbelievable
That's beautiful.
of the changes that are made. Let's end with this one. What has you feeling inspired these days? What's lighting you up?
Being able to be on podcasts like this, talking to people about being really empowered to start to trust themselves more in their decision-making and to rely more on their intuition. Mm-hmm. So I just love being immersed in being able to have these conversations with people and help people with this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a good time to have a kinder, gentler approach to the world. And speaking of which, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, my website is called lauratheintuitive.com. And then I also have Laura the Intuitive on Instagram. And on my website, there is a free little mini course for that 3-element process that I have that we went over earlier that they can get to get a better idea of how to work with those 3 elements. And of course, there's information on the Camino on my website.
When is the trip? When are you actually leaving?
September 24th is the start date. So we always recommend come a day earlier so you can adjust to the time zone. And then it just lasts until the 30th. So it's a quick, short trip. That way, if you're wanting to bounce around to other places, you've got some space to do that.
Perfect. Well, I hope you have a wonderful trip. My spidey sense is telling me that it's going to be quite transformative, not only for you, but for the folks that are fortunate enough to come with you. So I really appreciate your time today, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kathy. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.